Bryan Johnson is an individual who's doing a lot of amazing things for advancing science around health and longevity. But is his posture advice one of those things? See, as a physical therapist who's worked in the National Basketball Association and has helped people on the chronic pain and performance side across the world, I've spent a lot of time diving into what exactly is going to improve posture and what is not. I'm going to dissect the 5 things that Bryan recommends, and we're going to look at what the research says about those recommendations, which ones are worthwhile doing, because there are a few, and which ones aren't the best posture advice. And don't worry, if you stick around to the end, I'll make sure to show you what you should do instead so you can improve your posture for good. For those who don't know, Bryan Johnson was recently diagnosed with internal jugular vein stenosis. The jugular vein is one of the veins in the neck that regulates blood flow between the brain and the rest of your body. All stenosis means is a narrowing of the blood vessel. When the blood vessel becomes narrow, that impacts blood flow. There's a cluster of symptoms that can be associated with this particular stenotic condition. So when you hear stenosis, think high pressure. It works no different than conventional blood pressure. When my blood pressure increases, my blood vessels constrict or they get smaller, and that shoots blood faster to the target tissues. When I have low blood pressure, those vessels dilate. They get bigger and the blood flows more slowly. Under normal circumstances, the jugular veins should be able to change shape depending on what situation we are dealing with. For example, when you lie on your back, the jugular veins should get bigger. Conversely, when you stand upright, the jugular veins collapse, and this is actually normal. But in the case of stenosis, because there's now structural adaptations to the veins, they lose their ability to change shape. So when they can't change shape, pressure increases, and when you have higher pressure, the cellular reactions happen faster. When you have faster reactions, that can cause problems because cells bump into each other, things get damaged. What could cause stenosis to happen? Certainly there's genetic factors, environmental factors, and things of that nature. Bryan appears to be pretty healthy. I'm sure his blood markers are incredible. So is there a postural component? It turns out there might be. According to this study right here, cervical spondylosis, another fancy word for arthritis, is associated with increased compression to the jugular veins. Moreover, certain bony morphologies such as elongated styloid processes, which are in the back of the neck, could also contribute to this stenotic presentation. How does posture relate? So if my neck is in a certain position, or I have less available motion, that could alter the ability of the jugular veins to manage pressures in the neck and the head. Fixing your posture could improve some of the symptoms that Bryan is talking about. But is the way that Bryan is going about it the best way to improve your posture? Bryan's first tip is to pretend an invisible string is pulling you up tall. Because we're on our phones and we're on screens for an extended period of time, this cue could help get us out of that position and improve flow. But there's one problem with that. The more upright I am, the more the jugular veins collapse, and this can influence my ability to manage blood flow in my neck and cranium. So if I pull myself even more upright, is that going to really fix the issue? But that's not all. Things like sitting and being on your phone may impact your posture, but there's one thing even more important that being in a more slouched position impacts, and that is your breathing. All of these studies here show correlations between forward head posture, increased thoracic kyphosis or roundedness, impacting your lung volumes or your ability to move air in and out of your body. Air movement is important for managing pressure, because the real key to reducing pressure in the blood vessels is creating more space. Every time you breathe in, your airway has to expand in all directions to make sure you can fill your lungs. And that's not just the upper airway in the neck, but also the rib cage. When you're pulling yourself up through an invisible string, it doesn't change the expansion that has to happen in the ribs or the upper airway. So if you really want to improve your posture and you want to reduce pressures in the neck, you have to change the shape of these areas. The only way that the shape can change is if you manage airflow going in and out of your body. Bryan's second habit is avoiding phone use. Certainly when we're on our phones, we get changes in posture, although the amount, according to these studies, is quite small. But of course, these changes might be small enough to impact your breathing, and according to this study, that actually is true. But one thing Bryan suggested was to hold your phone up like this as you are texting. But there's one thing missing when you are still looking at your phone, and that's the influence of the eyes. You see, according to this study, the ciliary muscle, which is your focus muscle in your eye, correlates with increased upper trap activity. The more the upper traps are engaged at rest, the less available motion you have. Also, too, these studies show that being on a screen can increase your incidence of neck pain as well as eye strain. Anytime you hear increased muscle activity or strain or focus, you want to think increased pressure. When there's more pressure, there's less movement. When there's less movement, guess what that does to the veins? It contributes to the high pressure environment that we see with internal jugular vein stenosis. Being on screens less could be a good idea for your posture, but it's for slightly different reasons than what Bryan talks about. And the fix may not be just to hold your phone in an upright position, but to actually get off the screen, look as far out as you can, so that way you reduce the focus strain that our eyes are undergoing. Tip 3 is to move more, and I completely agree with Bryan here. The more you move, the more options your body has available, the better that increases circulation, and that can reduce pressure. Holding any one position for too long, which includes upright posture, limits blood flow, increases muscle activity, and can contribute to a high pressure environment. The more you move, the less pressure you'll be producing in any one given area. Tip 4 and 5 were strengthening specific muscles. Bryan showed an exercise in the video where he focused on pulling the shoulders back and then doing activities to engage the levator scapula, which is a muscle that attaches between the neck and the shoulder blade. The problem with this exercise is it does nothing to change the dynamics of the rib cage. Remember, poor posture is associated with alterations in your ability to breathe. If I'm pulling the shoulders back, that's going to actually limit the amount that my upper back and the back part of the ribs can expand, which may impact lung volumes. But is Bryan's second exercise a good recommendation? His second exercise is to move the head slightly up. And I actually really like this from an airway perspective, because when you tip the head back, that opens up the airway, much like when you're giving someone CPR. And there were other things that the physical therapist who Bryan was working with mentioned I thought was quite important. He had discussed that some people will clench when they do this activity. Clenching increases muscle activity and makes the airway smaller, so that limits the expansion that can happen in the neck. And the last thing the therapist said, which was quite important, is that you want holding a posture to be low effort. And that really is the key when it comes to improving your posture. If you try really hard to hold any one position, that increased effort will increase muscle activity. More muscle activity reduces available space to move, and that's going to increase pressure. That could negatively impact some of the postural issues that Bryan is dealing with. How do we reduce effort? You should try these moves instead. We're actually going to learn how to move with minimal effort. Take a foam roller, put it on the middle third of the rib cage. You're going to sag into the foam roller. Think about melting into it. Hand's gonna be on the sternum. From here, think about a straight line from your nose to your chest, to your tummy, to your zipper. You're gonna inhale, roll everything back, exhale, roll forward, and really think about melting into the foam roller. You wanna lift your knee up slightly because that's going to allow the pelvis to rotate along with the rest of the body. It shouldn't really feel like any effort. Some people will feel the glutes working. If that's you, go with your legs a little straighter like this and just rotate everything back and forth that way. Try that for 2 sets of 10 to 20 reps per side a couple times a day, and I would do it for 2 to 4 weeks before progressing to the next move. Once you've mastered moving with low effort, we then want to work on expanding between the shoulder blades. This will actually restore normal thoracic kyphosis, or rounding. Yes, folks, your upper back isn't meant to be this straight thing that never moves. There's actually a normal curve between the shoulder blades. It's a problem if it happens only at 1 or 2 segments. With this movement, we're going to create that normal rounding through all of the spinal segments. Grab a mini band, put it around your wrists, and you want your elbows resting so they're quite a bit lower than your shoulders, but not so low that you're slouching over. You want to keep your eyes forward and your chest parallel to the wall. The hands can either be facing one another, or for a little extra credit, you can have them facing you. This requires more motion though. Silently breathe in through the nose. On the exhale, you're going to rock back so your weight is on your sit bones. Again, make sure you don't slouch. And then from here, you're going to spin your arms out against the band. You'll feel your shoulder blade muscles working. Silently breathe in through the nose, soft exhale through the mouth. I would do 5 sets of 5 breaths a couple times per day with that move. Again, do it for 2 to 4 weeks before moving on to the next one. The last move, and by far the hardest, is like a downward dog on steroids. This move will open up the chest and improve your rotation at the cervicothoracic junction. If you're someone who's got kind of that hump right at the lower part of the neck, this is a key move for mobilizing that area, and that's really critical for opening up the number of postures you can assume. Here's how you do it. You'll want to get on your forearms, and then keeping your entire forearm flat, weight evenly distributed between the elbow and the base of the wrist. Silently breathe in through the nose, exhale, lift the knees up and push the hips back, and you're going to be looking kind of like right here on the ground, so almost towards the feet. Silent in through the nose, soft exhale through the mouth. If you want an additive effect with this, you can also work on cervical rotations in that position. Inhale, turn your head to the right. Exhale, turn your head to the left. I would do 5 sets, 5 breaths, a couple times a day, again for 2 to 4 weeks. And then once you've mastered all of those, you can incorporate them into a daily routine that you might do before sitting for a longer period of time. And although Bryan's video does have good posture tips, we have to realize that posture is not a static thing, but is the ability to assume many positions. This is what reduces strain in the neck, and it can improve dynamics, not just of your body, but your blood vessels, nerves, everything within your system. Now, if you are someone who does have to sit for long periods of time and you have to work on a screen and you're like, ugh, what do I do there? Well, what I would do is check out this video right here where I go into the truth about sitting posture, how to navigate sitting for long periods of time, and you'll also get some other exercises that you can incorporate into your posture routine.